This presentation addresses how Charles S. Peirce, who's an American pragmatist philosopher from the late 19th, early 20th century, positioned the diagram within a broader conceptual framework of signs and the way that that informs a pedagogical approach to beginning design education that uses drawing as a tool for analysis, understanding, and ultimately for design. I will begin with an overview of Peirce's notion of the diagram as a means of representing and rendering intelligible what he termed the form of relations. The diagram is addressed in Peirce's theory of signs, or semiotic, which was developed over decades dedicated to working through issues related to signs and signification. Given the enormity of Peirce's project, the limited time we have, and my own focus on a very small aspect of Peirce's thought, it will be a very limited treatment of the theory of signs. So, while Ferdinand de Saussure's model of the sign in the form of a self-contained dyad comprised a signifier and signified, Peirce posited that signs were comprised of three parts: the representamen, or what he termed the sign vehicle, the object, and the interpretant. And the interpretant is Peirce's own contribution to semiotics. The representamen, or sign vehicle, signifies particular features of an object. The interpretant provides a translation of the representamen and results in an understanding of the sign. Albert Atkin has written that Peirce believes that the sign-interpretant relation to be one of determination. The sign determines an interpretant. Further, this determination is not a determination in any causal sense. Rather, the sign determines an interpretant by using certain features of the sign in the way that it signifies its object to generate and shape our understanding. That's a mouthful. Well, it can be simplified. So Atkin uses fire as an example of the object. Fire produces smoke, which functions as the sign vehicle. And the presence of smoke, even in the absence of flame, determines an interpretant through the connection between smoke and fire. While the interpretant plays an integral role in Peirce's tripartite system, I will focus on the connection between the sign vehicle and the object because of the role that diagrams play in conveying essential characteristics of an object through the sign vehicle. Peirce very much liked tripartite divisions, as we're going to see. In keeping with his sympathy for the phenomenological approaches, Peirce argued that the nature of the object governs the nature of the sign vehicle. He maintained that there should always be a distinction between sign vehicles, depending on whether they addressed qualities, existential facts, or conventions and laws. And that distinction resulted in three categories: an index, which relied on physical or existential relationships to the object. So we can think about that, for example, as the paw print of an animal. An icon is used to represent the qualitative aspects of the object, and a symbol relies on conventions that connects sign vehicle with the object. Although Peirce ultimately questioned whether distinctions could be made between icons in his later work, his classification system is nevertheless useful for bracketing the diagram as a distinct mode of communicating the results of research through the making of drawings. According to Peirce, the diagram represents a definite form of relation. This relation is usually one which actually exists as in a map or is intended to exist as in a plan. But this is so far from being essential to the diagram as such, that if details are added to represent existential or experiential peculiarities, such additions are distinctly of an undiagrammatic nature. The pure diagram is designed to represent and to render intelligible the form of relation merely. Peirce makes specific reference to representing existential or experiential peculiarities, noting that details that are addressed are distinctly of an undiagrammatic nature. And I take issue with Peirce on this, and I'll come back to this claim later. I'll use remaining time to focus on a partie diagram, which is a specific type of diagram used to represent the central idea, in the case of architecture, of a building. I will first consider how partie diagrams are employed in the process of design, and then address how the diagrams are integrated into a pedagogical approach that encourages analysis and discovery of formal and spatial ideas through drawing. In the process of design, partie diagrams are often used to explore how constituent parts and the relationship between parts to a whole, in Peirce's words, are intended to exist. The partie diagram, when used as a design tool, provides a means of exploring design strategies and clarifying intentions. Drawings produced during the process of design are used to explore the relation between building and context, as well as between the distribution of space. The diagrammatic drawings that we see at the top here of Louis Kahn's Kimball Art Museum reveal the process of thinking through possible relations between building elements, between building and site, and between construction technologies and experience. The diagram at the top left reveals the process of thinking about how the distribution of discrete parts of a building can determine movement and frame views. Partie diagrams reveal overall organization of elements, and diagrams that move beyond relations between constituent parts reveal thinking about order, measure, and precise part-to-whole or part-to-part relationships. Partie diagrams also show thinking about how building form both contains interior space and may define the relationship between interior, exterior, or exterior relations between parts of a building. In the case of the Palmyra House, the diagram by Studio Mumbai at the top demonstrates their intention to create exterior space that is defined by and implied between bar-like buildings. The examples I just discussed employ partie diagrams of a means of exploring and communicating a form of relation that is intended to exist. I'll now turn to how the partie diagram can be used as a form of drawing that focuses attention on a form of relation that actually exists, but remains obscured by the complex nature of the whole. Partie diagrams can also be employed as a means of analysis to determine the relations between the whole and constituent parts, as well as the formal organization and spatial relations. In Peirce's terminology, a definite form of relation. As indicated earlier, Peirce maintains that details representing existential or experiential peculiarities are distinctly undiagrammatic in nature. However, partie diagrams that are conceived as a means of examining the nature of the object and revealing design intentions challenges this claim by positing that drawing methods can communicate experiential peculiarities, although not necessarily experiential particularities. So I think top right is a student drawing, and here there is the built thing, the thing itself. And by beginning to look closely at the thing itself, to begin to think through how the designers have thought about relationships between spaces, relationships between inside and outside, what constitutes a wall surface versus what is conceived as a solid or a mass, although this is enclosed by walls and operates as a room, you see the shading representing something that ultimately is experienced as a mass or a solid object. The process of abstraction that is necessary to communicate essential aspects of a building is far from easy for beginning design students, who often focus on external appearance, that is the whole, or on specific parts that are considered in isolation. A primary aim is to learn to look in ways that seek to discover what Peirce identifies as the form of relation. The process does not seek to deny the experiential, but rather to consider how an iterative process of diagramming through drawing allows ideas to emerge, specifically those ideas that may have been obscured by the totality of our synthetic everyday experience. Because ultimately, the diagram is not the way we experience buildings, but ultimately the diagram reveals a way of thinking that's resulted in built form that structures our experience. The process of drawing and redrawing diagrams is also an exploration of representation and communication. Diagrams can capture aspects of experiential peculiarities. A line can represent transparency, opacity, and degrees of translucency. A solid figure on the page can communicate how one may experience an object as a solid or a mass. Diagrams focus conversations, and the process of drawing diagrams encourages thinking through drawing. Attempts to represent complex design ideas through diagrams focus attention on identifying and communicating the essential. The process of drawing also requires critical decisions about the marks made, decisions regarding line weight, line type, and methods of hatching or shading, forces careful consideration of both the object of analysis and ultimately the sign vehicle that's communicating the nature of the object itself. I'll conclude with the return to Peirce's statement about the characteristics of the diagram. So I'll let you read through that again. The party diagram is a useful tool because it allows designers to explore and those who engage in analysis to discover definite forms of relations. While Peirce's theory of signs provides a useful framework for thinking through the potential of diagrams, his claim regarding the representation of what he terms experiential peculiarities can be taken as a positive provocation. Peirce's definition of a diagram challenges us to consider how the drawing of a sign vehicle can both clearly communicate the form of relation and the experiential peculiarities of the object itself. Thank you.